All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Future of Work and Leadership, where we discuss with seasoned engineering leaders how they are navigating the future of work with changing conditions every day with respect to the market, technology, and things like that. Today, we are super excited to have Akshay Arora, a senior director at Indigo AG. Akshay has lots of experience leading teams, building web applications, mobile apps, and also financial trading systems. He has experience with enterprise level work, maybe at Zillow Group or Blue Mountain Capital Systems, and also startups like Minerva and then Street Easy. Akshay, we really appreciate your joining and sharing your experiences with the engineering community today.
Thanks for having me, Gopi. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. So Akshay, as you see, we are seeing not just one, but two major shifts. One is people transitioning after COVID. And the second thing is the macroeconomic conditions today. So the business, the engineering teams are still coming to terms after the COVID and also the current economic conditions, what and how to focus on and then how to meet the business objectives. So as an engineering leader, what do you see as the biggest challenge that people like you, other engineering leaders are facing today to meet their business objectives?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the answer depends on the stage your company is in right now. The early stage startup scenario is really difficult. Minerva was my previous company before I joined Indigo, and they were a seed stage startup. Getting money beyond seed stage is exceedingly difficult given the current economic scenario. And your entire approach to outlast the downturn, that's what the focus has to be on. And if you have product market fit, great, you'll do fine. But if you're still trying to figure that out, you'll probably have to shift your business strategy to see how long you can survive. And so that may not necessarily be what you want to hear if you're an early stage startup, but that's the reality of where things are. If you're farther along, if you're a larger company or you're already public, I think you're now looking at, and we have some historical records of what to do in this type of scenario. Probably most notably the dot-com bust in 2000, 2001. At that time, no one was hiring, whereas today people are hiring. And so the outcomes are a little bit different in what we can expect. However, like it was in 01, like it was in 08 after the financial collapse, and then also now, there are opportunities for companies that are finding a product market fit to double down and invest more deeply and try to really ramp up their production. This is the opportunity where new startups will come about. And I think there's opportunity to explore industries that don't have transparency, figure out key hires, and think about how you might be able to expand your business given where things are today, if that is something that you can afford to do. So I think those are the things that I'm seeing.
All right, wonderful. Now, having said that, let's try to understand a little bit actually about how to set the strategic goals for the engineering department in 2023. So whether you call it the goals or how to focus on track them, or maybe you call it as the OKRs or KPIs, what are your suggestions on setting the engineering department strategic goals for the coming 2 quarters or the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think what's going to happen, and we've already seen this happen at very large organizations so far, is tightening the belt. Operational excellence is going to be mandatory for mid-sized companies. Larger companies probably already have a lot of this, and they're just course correcting from hiring that they've done in the past couple of years. Mid-sized companies and smaller companies are also doing the same thing. And the smaller companies are going to be extremely tight with money. And I think we have to figure out how to make things work with the team that we have, or even a potentially smaller team as we look at the next couple of months. And I think that's where our strategy should be focused, in trying to figure out how to ensure that our teams are able to communicate well with each other, ensure that when we come across projects that we're going to be crossing organizations or crossing multiple teams, we have operational rigor and we have operational excellence. I think focusing on that outside of like the rapid startup culture is going to be extremely important in order to ensure that the smaller companies are able to get through this, or mid-sized companies are able to get through this year.
All right. So that being said, Akshay, you are not just dealing with leaner teams and shrink budgets, you're also dealing with distributed teams across the globe. Now, communication becomes so very important at that point of time. So, and also, hey, keeping them engaged, focused on the vision is an additional challenge. So for the leadership, and that being the engineering manager, that adds so many parameters or layers to his navigating through this challenge. So communication wise, or keeping your engineering team, mainly distributed team, motivated, any things that worked for you, and what should engineering leaders be focused on do that better?
Oh, that is a great question. And I think what this is the answer that I'll give is what works for me may not work for you. Right? This is, it's really tricky. And if we think about, we should really be learning how companies and teams that were remote prior to COVID operated. They know how to do this. They've been doing this for years. They're probably the leaders in this space. We're all, the rest of us are just trying to catch up now. Now, I had one team that was remote prior to COVID, whereas my organization largely was not. The team I'm currently on, again, it was all in office prior to COVID, and now, as you have correctly assumed, distributed globally across time zones from Hawaii to Ukraine. So a huge swath of time zones. How do we stay connected? I think there are a couple of, we have to figure out how to do asynchronous communication better. We have to figure out how not to devolve an organization into a pure meeting culture in order to get on the same page. And I think those are the key things, and learning from organizations and teams that have done this better. Maybe do a lot of experimentation within your own teams to see how many meetings you can delete from your calendar and try to do asynchronously. In some cases, it's simply not possible, but I think there are ways to try to think about who is actually required to be at a meeting, who needs to be informed of the result of the meeting, and so therefore doesn't actually need to be present. I think a lot of times there's a lot of FOMO when it comes to understanding what's happening at the organization, and people elect to join far more meetings than they should in order to get the FYI. And if that's all you need, we need to get into a better culture of keeping documentation of our meetings itself. A lot of organizations don't do that. A lot of teams don't do that. It's something that I'm thinking about deeply today, because these are some of the problems that I'm facing right now in helping. And I'm doing this by practicing this on all my own meetings. I take minutes of my own meetings to make sure that, and it's linked in every meeting invite, so that anybody who missed out can go to the agenda and see everything that happened in the meeting and not worry about not having the information that they needed to have. And so I think there are a couple of things that we can do to do this better, especially as we think about teams that are across multiple time zones. If you have someone that's in Eastern Europe and you also have someone that's in the Pacific in the same team, you're going to have no actual time overlap. How do they communicate with each other, right? And if that's how they're going to communicate with each other, maybe that's how the rest of the team should also do it. It's, I think that allows everyone to be experiencing the same thing and kind of figuring things out the same way.
All right, amazing. Very nice to have that insight. Now, also, Akshay, for somebody who has been technical in terms of a developer or going to a tech lead and an engineering manager role, what are some of the things you suggest for them to align to the business goals? Because at the end of the day, the bottom line drives the company, and then somebody who is more technical should also be aligned to the business objectives. So for a new engineering manager, what are your suggestions on how they should be also aligned to the specific business objectives, and what are the activities that they should put in their calendar to help them navigate the journey better?
Yeah, great question. And I think this is where a lot of early career managers will slip up because oftentimes people gravitate towards doing what they're comfortable with and knowing. So a brand new engineering manager will likely end up fulfilling the role of tech lead rather than letting their tech lead do that work. And so I would point to a couple of, and if people are readers or audiobook, I would point to a couple of resources that are available to purchase to kind of learn from others that have studied this space. The Leadership Pipeline is one such book. And of course, Camille Fournier's The Manager's Path is an excellent resource to understand how how management works. And in Camille's book, specifically how an engineering manager works, and thinking about what does it mean to be a leader and how do you gain alignment. There are also a couple of talks that have been giving up on how to manage up and managing peers. Those are important and equally important skills that someone should understand. If you don't know how to manage up, you're probably not going to be giving the correct information to your managers, in which case it's probably just going to become not a great relationship. They're going to continue to ask you questions. You feel like you're going to get micromanaged and things like that. And then, when you feel like you're losing control, you end up doing the same thing downwards. And so again, that engineering manager will get back into the spot where they're just being a tech lead rather than being an engineering manager. So really formulate your plan around engineering leadership, thinking about what are the business objectives. Make sure that you have clear insight into what the long-term vision is, and ensure that you're setting up your tech lead to take over your job, right? Or someone else on your team who has a career path into being a manager, making sure that you're grooming them to take over your job, because eventually you will have the opportunity to get promoted if you do a good job. Or if there's no such opportunity at your company, you will take that role somewhere else. And you want to ensure that you as a manager have done, like, you're able to step away and no one will notice. That to me is the true measure of success. If you can step away from your role and no one notices because there is someone else to take over. And so focus on career building, focus on ensuring that there's someone else to step in to the gap that you're going to leave behind, and make sure that you really think about not the technical side of how the problem is going to be solved, but the larger picture of how your team is going to work with other teams to solve the problem for the company.
Wow, very, very nice. I appreciate sharing that. Also, Akshay, technology is such a big ocean, and then there's disruption. Like earlier, it wasn't every year, now it's every quarter. Now, for an engineering manager, as he's transitioning his career from a hardcore, hands-on technologist like coding and whatnot, as he moved to a more seasoned engineering manager role where he's focusing on business objectives, how do you suggest he still be on top of his game by being technically savvy, where he has a bandwidth problem of not being able to code every day, or still be able to catch up with the technical developments or the best practices or the new tools and softwares?
That's a good question. And I think it depends on the type of manager this person is going to be. I think if you're early management, you likely need to stay technical. You need to stay on top of things. You need to figure out who your trusted sources are, who are your best engineers that are going to tell you about what's up and coming. And then I would also push to say that you probably don't need to stay particularly technical. Folks say that once you become a manager, your technical aptitude stops growing because you're not really doing that kind of work day in and day out. You're probably not necessarily learning about new technologies or new paradigms. I would say about new technologies, you probably don't need to know. Someone's going to bring it up to you, and that is your opportunity to learn about them and figure it out, and ask the challenging questions of why is this new technology useful? Right? Thinking back about boring technologies, you probably don't need to know about the next hot thing. It's just not going to be that relevant in what you're doing day to day, unless that is what your company is. Right? That only then do you really need to stay at that on top of it. So I would say that my advice is figure out who are going to be the ones that do this work and challenge and learn, and find and learn from them. You're not gonna have time to do this on your own. And I would say that you probably shouldn't.
Understood. It's a great answer. Now, shifting gears here a little bit to people who are starting their career, and especially the Gen Z, what do you suggest, especially keeping in mind the new AI tools, ChatGPT and whatnot, coming over? And there's always the temptation that you don't need to learn this because this is no more relevant. What are your suggestions to the Gen Z, how they start their career and what skills are still required for them to be successful to put in their foundation?
Yeah, good question. I think some common problems will be more easily solved by AI-like solutions. However, those solutions are not going to be able to piece together to solve strategic problems. They're not going to be able to figure out, especially when you're trying to come up with a new space or you're trying to solve a problem in a space that exists but isn't particularly technologically forward. You're still going to have to do the strategic thinking and figure out how the pieces work together. If you truly do not understand the underneath of how things are done, it's unlikely that you're going to be successful in this space either. Sure, there's a bunch of copy and paste stuff that can happen. You could probably ask ChatGPT to create an upload application that will store things into S3 so that I can then view them via my API. And I'm sure it'll come up with something that's pretty okay. And maybe in a couple of years, it'll come up with a viable solution that we could just plug and play. However, you're going to run into problems eventually with that. It'll probably be generic. It'll probably be many companies using the same exact thing. And eventually there'll be performance issues. And if you don't know how that works, you're stuck with whatever performance you got. There's going to be no way to improve that without you actually understanding the fundamentals of how those things work. One of the most important classes that I probably took in college, in university, and you don't need to go to university to learn this, but is understanding how TCP/IP works. Just the fundamentals of how all information across computer networks is traversed and why it works the way it does. And no, I never had any pure use for that, but understanding that kind of helps you deal with some of the performance problems that can come when you're at the core level of your web applications. There are opportunities for performance, especially when it comes to thinking about, early days or mid days of Facebook and larger organizations like Zillow, where every little byte counted, where we didn't have 4G, 5G, you barely had 3G, right? And you're trying to deal with how do you cram as much data as possible into this tiny little buffer that's allowed. And the opportunities there were because you understood TCP protocol, and you could rewrite how data was transmitted to better take advantage of the system. And those things aren't going to be solved for you. I think there are opportunities for people to continue to learn how those things are done. And I think a lot of it revolves around today, and I would probably start with piecing together different ways that these components that may be automatically generated for you, how do they fit this strategy? How do you think about that? And how do you connect those pieces together? How do you solve those problems? I think those are things that whatever we know about AI today, we're not there yet. I don't know when and if we will get there until we actually reach singularity.
Understood. Wow, this whole AI thing has taken us by a storm, much faster and at much quicker pace. And then we're going to see, it's going to be interesting 2023 and 2024, how the world is going to change. So very nice insight for the Gen Z. And also, as the Gen Z is trying to find their first job or changing careers as well in their initial 2 to 3 years of their career, and especially with the current macroeconomic conditions, what are your suggestions to them to stand out before a hiring manager, so that their resume being seen, or they're not just losing out to somebody just putting 6-page resumes and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would immediately say, make sure your resume is not 6 pages. Right. I've been in engineering for a little over 20 years, and I think I now have a 2-page resume. I made that change a couple of years ago. really, there's very little reason for anyone to have more than one-page resume, especially if you're starting out. The question about how do you differentiate, that's a great question. I don't think I have a good answer for that one. As a hiring manager, I don't often look at the resumes directly. I rely on my recruiting partners and HR partners to help me with that. When I was at a smaller startup, I was looking at them directly. And the things that mattered to me most was not just that people had studied React, which is what I was hiring for at the time, or Vue or whatever JavaScript front end, but they've thought about how to try to solve creative problems, not just on their own, which I think a lot of folks do, especially if you've gone to some kind of boot camp, or you've done something in university. A lot of people have projects that they've created on their own and then published. Maybe they created an app for it that's live on the App Store. That shows a command of certain planning, which is great. It shows a knowledge of certain technical expertise, which is also great. It doesn't show how well you work with others, which is what I need probably more than anything else coming into an organization. I'm not hiring people that can do anything on their own. I'm hiring people that know how to work well with others. And I will likely value someone who has better team skills and a lower technical aptitude today than someone who's an excellent technical contributor, but doesn't necessarily know how to work well with a team. And that to me is probably paramount. Their ability to work with others in a team. The rest of the stuff, if you have a solid background, you can learn everything else and you can become the most excellent technical contributor.
Wow, very nice, very nice. And then with that thought, which is very good, I maybe put you on a spot to give us some examples, because hiring managers, we're all so ingrained or so much wired to asking those stereotype questions, which sometimes it could be like syntax questions, or sometimes about, hey, how does this thing do or not? And you brought up a very good point that they may not be relevant, and we need to be asking about how they are able to better work with other team members, and then maybe how they are able to problem solve and then pick up something new just thrown at them. So what are some of the questions you would ask an engineer, which would give you as engineering manager the insight that, hey, they are the right team member for my team?
Yeah, I think there are two types of questions that I would ask, or two questions that come to mind right now. One, which is actually not necessarily about a team, but it's more about introspection. I would ask, what is the most recent new thing that you've learned about yourself? I want to know, how much do they introspect onto their own actions? How much are they learning about themselves, and how are they able to leverage that to change their behavior and the way they perform? And another question that I would ask is probably relatively generic question that I'm sure lots of other hiring managers ask or should ask, is talk to me about a project that you worked with other people where things did not go as planned. Who was to blame? Why? How? And the answer to that is, how do they attribute blame? Do they own part of it themselves? What was their particular role in said team? Were they the leader of the team? Was there a leader of the team? Was it just a pure democratic voting system? Like, I want to hear about how the team organization was. What did they participate in? What actually went wrong and why? And how is blame or lack of blame attributed?
Wow, very, very nice. Oh, Akshay, I'm getting so many like valuable insights and out of the box ideas from you. And then I would have loved to continue the conversation, but I think we are running out of time. So we will definitely take time to talk again. Maybe I would ask one more different question, maybe again at a holistic level. Now, with all the things, it includes like leaner teams, budgets, and changing conditions and changing perspective about things, both from the business and also the engineering and also the hiring. What do you suggest, now that you have worked for a startup which had a hard time sustaining, or that you're also working for an enterprise level company, whether you have how to use any external source, whether it's a external partner, vendor, or there are some entities where they could partner with you on equity. So my question is, how do a company navigate 2023 when they have a gap in their technology experience or even budget experience to have the runway? What are some of the ways you suggest that businesses should not pivot, rely upon as alternate ways to stretch through 2023 to possibly increase their probability of success?
Yeah, I think there are two opportunities here. One is you scale down your operations if your goal is to just out-survive your competition and just make it to the next year. Not great in terms of being able to capture more clients, probably not great in being able to develop new product. However, if you have an okay product that you're looking to just maintain and get into the next year so that potentially the economic climate is better so you can fundraise more and then rehire, that's one opportunity. The other one, if you have the funds, lots of people will use external vendors. Find vendors that work within your language or within close time zones to you. Ukraine, East Europe, South America, LATAM are very popular destinations for folks to look for individuals. There's also, I forget, Angel List, whatever the company's called now. There are lots of folks. I had quite a bit of success hiring individuals out of Africa. And it really comes down to also, and this is my personal belief, is paying them the right salary. Do not lowball just because you're hiring in a poor country, but do understand that your salary will have market ramifications in their local area as well. So, you probably do not want to pay a San Francisco salary to someone who's working in a rural village in sub-Saharan Africa. But you do want to pay them something that is extremely respectable and responsible, that you would be comfortable saying that this is what they deserve to get paid. And so I think outside of being able to hire locally, those are the likely two options that you would take. And probably that is what companies that I work for have done. And that is what companies that I work for today do.
Wow. Very, very nice insights. Akshay, we had a lot of value where the engineering community, whether it's a newbie or whether it's a seasoned engineering manager, right from the perspective, the skills and how to navigate through the systems, whether they are a startup or enterprise level. Thank you so much for all the valuable insights. I'm sure we can drill down and then go deeper into each of these points at a later time. But I appreciate all your time, and then best wishes for any and everything that you're doing at your firm.
Gopi, thank you very much. I appreciate coming on the show. And absolutely, I'm happy to dive into any of these things and continue the conversation later on.
Wonderful. All right, Akshay, have a good one.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.